Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daryl Bennett. Come back swinging. First simulcast, LinkedIn Live, Facebook Live, YouTube Live. And I wanted to share with you a little bit about where we're going in 2021. Many of you have asked, many of you have been following my journey. Many of you have seen the ups and the downs, the mountaintop moments and the valleys. Many of you have seen me at moments where you wonder, is he ever going to make it out of that? And so you know that the story Comeback Swinging is not just a book. It's not just a catchphrase. It's not just a tagline that we trademark to make people feel better. It is truly the story of my life. It is the story of where I've come from. It is the story of so many people. It's the story of communities. But let me not get all on that. I really want to focus this time, first of all, to honor the life, the legacy, the extraordinary example of Dr. King. Dr. King, of course, it's not enough that can be said about him. When I was younger, I'll be honest, when I was younger, I used to feel like, yeah, they pick him, and that's the only person we really hear about in Black History Month. And I still think we have to do a better job at informing people of the richness and diversity of people within the Black community that were responsible for the change and the progress that we have today. But I must say there is not enough that has been said about Dr. King. I think it's one thing to talk about his eloquence. It's one thing to talk about his vision. You know, people talk about this, I have a dream. But I think the best thing about Dr. King was that he personified love. He personified grace. He personified when he could have really been hateful and he could have been led by anger and division. He personified that we should choose a higher path. He once said that the arc of the universe is long, but it bends, listen to this, it bends toward justice. And it's funny that he spoke those words almost 50 years ago, but it rings so true even today. And that's why I'm here to speak to you today about why we are embarking on this over the next year, jobs and justice, jobs and justice, jobs and justice. For those of you that's been following me, you know that my life has been about inspiring and empowering people. But I have to be honest with you. There were moments that I became disillusioned. When I first started inspirational speaking, I was about maybe 16 years old. At that point, I was still living in Virginia. I was going to school in Newport News, Warwick High School. And because I was a student leader and had a gift for speaking, I was often called on to speak. And it wasn't long before I began to be called on to speak beyond my capacity as a student leader and just as an influencer throughout the city. And of course, I love sharing this gift and I love encouraging people. But as I found, the more I did it, and of course, I'm talking as years went on, it started with me doing it, for fun in high school. And then when I went to college at Morehouse, I wrote the book, Daring to Be Different, when I was 18 years old. I wrote that between my freshman and sophomore year. And so that's when I really started taking seriously the business of speaking and inspiring and impacting people. And that's why I began to go to different places, different cities, different countries. And it was exciting to do it, but I started to get disillusioned. I felt like I was riling people up and then I was leaving. I felt like I only had one half of the answer. That's really what I felt like. I felt like, what's the point of motivation and telling you you can be great if I'm not giving you the tools and the resources to actually place you there? What good is it for me to just sort of get you excited if it doesn't lead to transformation, if it doesn't lead you to real resources and real networks and real tangible solutions to get you from here to there? And so that's when I began to try to figure out how could I use my law degree, because at this point I was going to law school. I knew I did not want to practice in the traditional way, but I had a heart for wanting to see people be impacted and inspired and to be lifted up and to be brought to a new level. And I knew that the platform I had, because I graduated from Morehouse, because I graduated from Harvard Law School, opened doors for me to be able to advance the cause of justice and freedom and equality and equity. And so I chose the path of saying, I don't want to choose the traditional law route, but I want to use the opportunity to maybe get into teaching or to inspire or something that's going to lead people from here to there. I'm telling you this because I want you to understand my story and how I got here. My book, Come Back Swinging, talks about the valleys. I'm not going to get into too much of it here, but you need to read the book. I talk about a period of time where I lost it all. I lost everything. I was in a period of confinement. I was in a period of loss, and I was in a period of just separation, literally and physically and theoretically and abstractly and very real from everything I knew. I lost my voice. I lost my sense of self. I lost who I was. And Come Back Swinging is not just about perseverance. It's not just about resilience, though it is about that as well, but it's about transformation. It's about doing the work. And I'm telling you all this to say that all of this led me to this place of how can I both encourage and inspire, and empower. How do we both tell people that they can be great and give people the tangible resources to be great? How can we link people with the things and the resources and the people and the mentorship and the practical solutions that's going to elevate their life? And so I began to work in social justice movements. Those of you that follow my story, you know that I was at Exodus. Shout out to Julio Medina, Executive Director of Exodus, doing phenomenal work. Exodus is one of the organizations on the forefront of speaking up about social justice, speaking up about some of the systems and structures that have kept people oppressed. But even then, I wondered, where's my place? Where does my background in law school, where does my credible lived experience through some of the dark days in my life come in? Where does all of that come in? So I began to go think about, how do I take that into corporate America? So I began to work with a company, PandaLogic, and we're helping people get employed. We're working with other companies, taking AI technology to help companies do high volume hiring. I'm talking about some of the world's biggest brands. I'm not going to say that, can't really say the names here, but we were a part of over 1 million people. I want you to hear this because I'm proud of this. Over 1 million jobs were filled through this company that I am doing sales with. You know, we call it sales, but it's really just spreading the word about this amazing AI technology that's being used to get people into employment. Finally, I begin to feel like my life is making sense. I told you all that to come here. Jobs and justice. I was trying to figure out, how does my life make sense? I don't just want to come on here and tell you, you can be great, you can do it. And then you wonder, okay, but how do I do it? And so this is the solution. For 2021, when you see me on here, you're going to hear me talk about jobs and justice. I'm going to be bringing people on from my network. These are people, some people that I went to school with. These are some people that I was in dark places with. If you read my book, you know what I mean when I say dark places. I'm trying to ease y'all into my story. Ease y'all in. I'm going to be bringing people in from all avenues of life so we can begin to talk about jobs and justice. Well, why are we saying jobs and justice? Look at everything that's going on in the world today. Look at everything that's happening in our country. Democracy is literally teetering on a string. Whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you have to be concerned not just about the future of America. You have to be concerned about the future of just like our existence, from what we're seeing, from what's being said. And as we see all this, the unrest, the anger, the frustration, what COVID did was expose the fissures that were already in our society. The inequities, not just in the penal system, but even in corporate America. There's a problem why so many people are graduating from college and cannot find jobs. I know people who, and I'm sure you do too, people who have 1 and 2 master's degrees that are still looking to get employed. People always talk about the unemployment numbers. I don't want to talk about the unemployment numbers because that only shares a part of the story. It doesn't talk about the people, one, that have totally left the job market, and it doesn't talk about the people that are underemployed. And it certainly does not mention the people who are employed, right? Maybe not underemployed, but they're working somewhere that they're not really fulfilled in, and they're just there, they're existing. And so what I've come to understand through my personal experience and through what I've seen growing up in Baltimore City, from what I've seen as an attorney, from what I've seen on the inside of prisons and working with people to rebuild their lives and build back up from failure, is that when you give a person employment, when you deploy them, not just employ them, but you deploy them, and you unlock their skills and you unlock the greatness that's on the inside of them, it changes their self-esteem. You don't have to talk about justice if we really talk about jobs. I don't mean jobs in the sense of just giving somebody something so they can get a check. I mean really putting them in the right seats. What's Jim Collins talk about? Good to great, putting people on the right bus in the right seat. When we talk about jobs, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about putting people in the right bus, in the right seat. Then people don't want to do the wrong thing. Victor Hugo, who wrote Les Miserables, once said that where there is crime, there will be darkness. This is what Victor Hugo said, not my words. Where there will be crime, there is darkness. He went on to say, instead of focusing on the crime, we should turn our attention to the forces that created the darkness. Let me repeat that. Not my words, Victor Hugo's. That where there is crime, there is darkness. And instead of focusing on the crime, we should turn our attention to the forces that have created the darkness. Let's go back to jobs and justice. If we can talk about why are people committing crime? I mean, it's not a monolithic answer across the board, and I don't want to make it seem that way. But I do want to say that if we can begin to start talking about why, not just what people did, not just what the action was, but why are we looking at entire communities where people are 13 and 14 and 12 years old who are leaving home and jumping off the porch, or whatever terminology you want to use, and have to find a way to work so that way you can support their families. And that work that they have found themselves in many cases, brings them into direct contention with the criminal justice system. And so that's why I say we cannot talk about one without the other. I don't want to sit here and talk about justice, 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 and not talk about the fact that the economic system in America has to be addressed. The fact that people are locked out of the system early on. I don't want to just talk about mass incarceration. I don't want to get on here and just talk about sentencing reform. I don't want to get on here and just talk about how we need to do better on the justice issues, because that's further on the funnel. I want to talk about a world, I envisage a world where we don't need that type of criminal justice reform, because people are deployed. People understand their purpose. People are appreciated for their worth. And it begins to shift the needle. So jobs and justice. We cannot talk about justice without talking about employment, without talking about purpose finding, without talking about ways to unlock the goodness in people. And we can't talk about jobs without talking about justice. Why are so many jobs still asking for people to check about a record, a criminal record that they had after they've served their time, in some cases 10, 20, 30 years. Now in New York, we pushed hard for what's called ban the box, which means it does not mean that an employer cannot ask about a criminal record. It just means that they can't ask about it before they've offered you a position. That's important. It's no reason why someone who has served their time. Let me tell a story. Let me make it better. When I used to work at Exodus, one of the things that I did was ran a program called, I taught one of the programs called Impact. And Impact, I was really proud of this. And for those of you that follow my work, and I'll make sure I drop the link, you can go on YouTube, Google Impact Daryl Bennett. You'll see the documentary. I was tasked with working with a program that would be part mentorship, part personal development, part inspiration for people who had been recently released from prison. And I've been doing a bunch of this type of work, partly because of my own life experience. I think people would be surprised at the number of collateral consequences that happens in some cases just as a result of an arrest. We don't even have to talk about a conviction. We don't even have to talk about a sentence. Just the fact that someone may have been arrested at the age of 15. Just because, and let's talk about again, when we talk about environment and where people grow up and how over-policing in certain places is just normal. So to ask someone if they had an arrest, what does that do? I mean, what is that really accomplishing other than a wholesale repudiation of entire communities, especially when we know that the justice system by and large has disproportionately affected Black and Hispanic communities. So you cannot talk one without the other. I don't want to talk about, oh, we got to give people jobs. We got to give people jobs. Yes, but we got to talk about justice too. We've got to talk about the fact that maybe you need to, as an employer, rethink the way that you are structuring your ads. I mean, it amazes me how prejudicial sometimes ads are written, and maybe you don't realize it. Maybe you need someone like me who's had my foot in both worlds to say, I see what it is that you're trying to do, but there is a better way. And so as we're talking about jobs and justice, and I'm bringing people on, we're talking about how to move the needle. Where we are now, we're not going to be able to move the needle without talking about both. Without talking about, when we talk about jobs, getting people hired, let's look at culture. What is culture really? What does it really mean when we say they don't fit here? What are we really saying? I think about the one influencer that said, maybe the person isn't good for the job, but they're great for the team. Because what she was doing was coming back at this concept of fit. Whenever I hear people say fit, I always think, I know what you're really saying. I don't look like you, talk like you, act like you, walk like you. And because of that, I don't fit. But I might be the best thing for your team because it is the diversity of thought. It is diversity of perspective that makes teams great, that makes problems solved. And so as we're moving the needle and we're talking about jobs and justice 2021, I want you to join me. You might ask, well, what part do I have to play? You have a part to play. It's not enough to listen to me. I appreciate the encouragement. I hear, some of you write me and say, keep on, give them hell, Daryl. I love what you're doing. You hold up the fist. All of that's nice, fine and well. But when it's all said and done, your children and grandchildren will ask, what did you do at this moment? What did you do at this moment when so much was at stake? What did you do at this moment when so many people and so many communities were hurting? What did you do in this moment? And so I want to ask you to join us. How can you join us? First of all, you can share this. You can share this. Your shares have currency. I don't want to overlook that. Every time you like something, it's currency. If someone were to call me today and say, Daryl, do you want $5 or do you want 5 shares? I'd say I want 5 shares. I'd rather you give us both so we can advance what we're doing. But I'd rather you get 5 shares because with those 5 shares, it's going to reach 5 people that we can't reach. We've got to spread the word. We've got to begin to connect the right people with the people who want to do right. We want to connect the job seekers with the people who want to employ them, who really want to employ them. I'm not talking about the companies that have the nice slogans and the cute taglines and the wonderful Twitter campaigns, but really have no intention of hiring anybody of color or diversity or disenfranchised communities. And if they do, they want to hire them at the lowest levels. Lose my number. I'm not talking that's not what I'm here for. I'm talking to people that really want to move the needle. I'm talking about people that really want to make a change. I'm talking about people who are tired of seeing corporate America not reflect the diversity and richness that is real America. I want you to join me. I want you to go to comebackswinging.com. I'll drop the link down there, comebackswinging.com. You can also go to darylbennett.com. If you are a job seeker, we need to know. We have a database. We're holding and keeping track of people who are looking for positions. We want to make sure and see that people get connected. We get connected with. So if you are a job seeker, let us know. Secondly, if you are an employer and you want to hire people, or you want to be a part of training. I understand you might say, look, Daryl, I have a software company, or I'm a tech company, or I'm a finance company, and I would love to go and hire people from those communities, whatever those communities are, right? But I can't do that because, they're not there, or I don't know. I've heard people say, what was the guy? I think he was the president of Wells Fargo that got in trouble for pretty much saying, we don't hire people of color because there's not enough of them that are qualified. I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but those were pretty much his words. Well, join with us. And we're going into colleges and universities and we are training people. Okay, so if you take the position, my company can't hire people, let's work with training. I remember we were working with a company called Applied Value. Shout out to Applied Value. Wonderful company, management consulting firm, doing great business in Midtown Manhattan. They couldn't hire the folks that we were working with that had just come out of, Rikers Island and upstate. But you know what they did do? They put their money where their mouth was and they began to help us, one, with funding the impact program, two, with beginning to expose and show people things that perhaps they wouldn't have otherwise. And with that exchange of not just information, but it was almost like a really spiritual exchange, between when we all would get in the room and talk. It just was a wonderful thing. But I'm bringing this up to say there are organizations I know that want to get involved with the work. If you want to get involved with the work, write me. Comebackswinging.com. Lastly, how can you get involved? Justice, 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 justice. Dr. King, of course, I'm going to end where I started. The legacy of Dr. King is that, it's always the right time to do the right thing. Justice is not the same thing as quiet. See, people have gotten peace and quiet mixed up. They always talk about, and the Bible even says that. People talk about peace, peace, and there's no peace. Because they really want quiet. They don't want peace. Quiet, perhaps, is the absence of conflict, but peace is the presence of justice. And Dr. King admonished a nation as he stood atop where that monument was. And he told us not just that he had a dream, but he admonished us to let justice, he quoted Amos, let justice run down like a river and righteousness like a mighty stream. So what is justice? I'll tell you, it's fairness and equality. I want you to join with us on Comeback Swinging. We've got for those of you that know me, I'm a graduate of Harvard Law School. You know that I've both been an insider in the law front and I've been on the inside. I have a team of people who are practitioners and people who are on the other end, people who are activists and people who are prosecutors, people who are really about the work of justice. This is not about trying to tear down people. This is not even about saying, burn the system, but this is about fairness. This is about saying if you have a law and you create a law, then you have to fairly apply it to everybody. This is about saying that you cannot unequally determine certain places and certain communities you want to use it and other places not. So what does justice look like? Justice is not just about reforming the penal system. In fact, we envisage a world where we don't even need half of the resources we are dedicating to criminal justice right now, or prisons and all of that. Justice is about creating pathways for people to have access to education. I think it's great I went to Harvard, but I want everybody to be able to go if they want to, or have a Harvard-like education. I don't think it's fair that you have to be born in a certain area to have a leg up. I don't think it's fair that if you played crew, you get a leg up on your application rather than if you played football, especially because chances are if you played crew, you probably came from a certain neighborhood. It's not your fault, but it's just the point. And as we saw this past year when the children of immigrants were being put in cages and the children of wealthy were buying their way into the Ivy League, you can imagine personally, I felt a way about that because I've had my foot in both ends. I've seen what it's like to be in a cage, justice. And I've also seen what it's like, how are you people buying your way into it? I mean, is this the time to be buying our way into? Is this not the time to speak up for equality and justice? So when we're talking about justice, I want you to understand, I want you to know what it is that we're doing. We're talking about creating fairness and equity. That's how it should be. That's how it should be. Everybody should be able to have access to quality health care. I mean, think about this for a second. When you talk about equal rights, the fact that there are people who stand for equal rights means that there are people on the other end, right, that hear that and say, you mean everybody should have equal rights? Nah, I'm not for that. Like, that means that there's somebody actually on the other side, that we're still at the place now. I told you the fact that Black Lives Matter was controversial in corporate America or anywhere, shame on you for that. Black Lives Matter, not Black lives are important, Black lives are precious, Black lives are better than your, Black matter. That's all. Black Lives Matter. So for us to talk about justice, we've got to begin to talk about what we say where I'm from, the real of the real. We've got to really begin to unpack and really begin to talk about how do we level the playing field, if we want to level the playing field. If we don't, then let's be honest about that. But if we really want to level the playing field, let's talk about this. Let's talk about how there is a direct line, because I got to say it, there's a direct line between the transatlantic slave trade, Jim Crow, and mass incarceration. It's a direct line. It's a direct line when you look at the proportion of people that were in cages before, in chains before, that are in cages today. And we've got to talk about that, because when there are politicians that stand up and say, if you are a felon, you should not vote, I only have a problem with that when most of the people that bear that moniker disproportionately are people of color. I have a problem with that. I'm trying to figure out, is there a hidden agenda? Because I don't believe in coincidences that way. And so the cause of justice is that we begin to really begin to unpack and unravel this. Jobs and justice, lastly. Why am I putting it together? We got to stop compartmentalizing. I've done it too long, which is why I struggled with even getting on Facebook, LinkedIn, to talk about justice issues. Because, and again, we have to be discreet about it. I'm not saying go to work and get crunk. But what I am saying is we go to work. See, it's so easy to talk about, well, jobs, but we don't want to talk about justice because we don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. And I've been in rooms like that, where they're fine with talking about hiring. They're fine with talking about initiatives to get 20,000 people in the city. But when we start talking about, well, what's on your applications? And what are the questions that you're asking? And why is it that with the hiring, you have 3 people that are doing the interviewing, and all 3 are, look a certain way? And why is it that you have this? And why don't you have certain affinity groups? Then people start feeling a little weird. But I think that if we're going to really, really make a change, let's be honest. Let's talk about it. And so let's not just talk about jobs. Let's talk about it in tandem with justice. And let's not talk about just justice. Let's talk about jobs. Let's get people hired. Let's get people hired. Because when you hire people, you're not just changing that person's life. I truly believe. I've seen it. I watched it. I saw it firsthand. I have seen what happens when a person's skills are deployed. I'm not just talking about employed, but deployed. I've seen what happens. It breaks cycles of poverty. It breaks cycles of crime. It breaks cycles of incarceration. It breaks cycles of just restlessness and purposelessness, because what it does is it begins to shift the person's focus from what's here to what's here, to what can be. And so that's why I feel so strongly about jobs. Even I'll tell you, having grown up in the church at a young age, I felt strongly about this, because I would sit in church and I felt like we get excited, and sometimes we hear a great sermon and it's woo. But then you go back Monday and you're struggling, and you go Tuesday and you're struggling, and Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and you wonder, does the God that we worship on Sunday care about my financial well-being? And by extension, because my financial well-being is messed up, it's messing everything else up. It's creating conflict in the home. Think about it. If money were not an issue, imagine half of the arguments that we have in the home that we would not have. And so when we're talking about employment, we're not just talking about putting more numbers, on a board so you say, oh, they got a job. We're really talking about moving the needle to give people a sense of worth. That's what we're doing, an identity. So you're going to join. I mean, if you like to join, I'm going to tell you, if you like to join me, you like to join what we're doing, comebackswinging.com. I'm excited. Jobs and Justice 2021. This is where I'll end. I'll end on this story. Yesterday, actually 2 days ago, was the launch of the Comeback Swinging radio show. Please check that out for those of you that's listening. I posted it on all of our social media platform channels, and please share that. And I begin by sharing the mountaintop speech by Dr. King. And Dr. King said, I may not get there, but I've seen the mountaintop. I'm not fearing any man. And I open with that speech because that was his last speech before he was killed. I know we like to say Dr. King died. He did not die. He was murdered. He was murdered for the cause of jobs and justice. A lot of people don't know that because they think he just talked about black versus white. But Dr. King began to speak about, in the latter part of his life, that the war in Vietnam against the brown people was the same war that was being perpetuated against the black people here in America. And he got a lot of flack for that. There were black people, leaders, who said, you need to stay out of white folks' business. And there were, of course, white people that said, you need to sit down and shut up. There are many who believe that was the reason ultimately why the decision was made that he had to be eliminated. Because again, as long as we're just talking about justice and not talking about reforming and changing the economic system, a lot of people are fine with that because they don't mind charity, but they don't want to change the system. I don't want to talk about charity. I don't want to talk about charity. I want to talk about justice, which is the redistribution of the system. Remember, it's the story that Jesus tells where, you know, the man is robbed on the road and he's laying near to death. And one guy walks by and he's like, I'm busy, I can't really do that. And the second guy walks by and he's like, I'm concerned because, you know, they might rob me too. But then the third one, who's not from the community, who's a Samaritan, walks by, and Jesus, teaching the masses, says, you know, which one was this man's neighbor? And he said, well, I guess it was the one that helped the dude up, you know, the one that actually gave him some sort of assistance. But this is the point that people missed. The guy that gave him assistance, that's charity. We celebrate it and we thank him for helping the man up off the road, but that's charity. I don't just want to talk about that man on that road. I want to talk about, why do people keep getting robbed on that road? That's justice. What's happening on that road that we need to deal with? Maybe there's some lighting that needs to happen. Maybe there's a system that's in place that's causing people to get robbed there. That's when we really begin to deal with things. And I don't want to play games and just say justice, 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 and not talk about redistributing the economic systems of this world. And when we start talking about that, that's when we start talking about really making change. And we will not talk about justice without talking about jobs. And we cannot talk about jobs and employing and deploying people and putting people in the right places without talking about, now we've got to relook at culture. We've got to relook at fit. We've got to look at rules and policies that we've put in place that really have kept more people out than brought us in. And that's why our companies haven't done as well. Because the truth is, the companies that are thriving the most, I know people are mad at big tech. I know people are saying they have too much power, but the truth of the matter is they're disruptors because they refuse to follow the rules. And they understand, to get the best talent, you have to be willing to look past the box structure. Who was it? Elon Musk said, I don't care if you have a college degree or not. I have certain things that I need you to fill. And if you can fill that, doesn't matter if you have a college degree. And we like that thinking, because the thinking that says you need the college degree for this role is also the same thinking that has kept so many people, Black communities, Hispanic communities, have kept women, Asian communities out of jobs, because they simply say, oh, you're not qualified, you don't have the experience. And so now we've got to begin to address that as well. Jobs and Justice 2021. Join us. I'll be here on all day, and I will not do it because we have things to do, but I want you to join with what we're doing. Thank you. Let me read a comment. Dr. King was a real hero. I respect him so much. People never die. That's right. Dr. King was a hero, but I don't want to minimize, and thank you for that. I appreciate that. But I don't think he was a hero, actually, because when we say he was a hero in some ways, and I know what you meant, but follow me for a second. in some ways, it minimizes our role. It makes him seem like he was something that we weren't. He was just like us. He felt the fear. He did it anyway. They killed him for what he believed. So I would not call him a hero. I'd say he did heroic things. He lived a heroic life, and he gave us a heroic example to show us that really great things are made by regular people who stand up and make a change. Wasn't it Mother Teresa that said, there's no such thing as great people? It's people who do things with great love. I love that quote. It's just such a beautiful quote. Thank you all for joining us on this live. Please share this, and trust me, it's going to be so much powerful content, so many guests, so many powerful conversations. You want to be a part of it, and we want to hear about what you're saying. Thank you all. Love you. I'm excited for where we're going. And as I sign off every broadcast, I want you to know this. No matter what you've been through, no matter how it looks, you can come back swinging. Thank you all.